This is Captain Chris Myers, Orlando Fly Casting Lessons. Today we're going to talk about fly casting in the wind. Thanks for joining. If you haven't been a subscriber to this channel, please consider doing so today. I've got lots of fly casting videos for you to check out. One of the topics people always ask me about is, can you show us about casting into the wind? First and foremost, casting into the wind really needs a well-formed loop. I have lots of videos that show you the fundamentals on how to make that loop, because until you can make the loop, not going to matter a big, wide, or non-existing loop, either in front of you or behind you, depending on which way the wind's going, is going to collapse, not straighten out. Line doesn't straighten. We start casting with no tension, wasting stroke. Result on the other end probably isn't very good. So we're going to talk about wind to your back, wind to the front. Seems like it would be easier casting downwind, but just as many times people have difficulties casting with a wind to their back because their back cast never comes close to straightening out, which results in a loss of tension going forward, and the forward cast falls in a pile. It goes a little farther with the help from the wind than it would have went if it was dead calm. But we still run into some problems. So I'm going to show you my technique for dealing with a wind to my back, and dealing with a wind in front of us really requires that well-formed loop, candy cane shape, maybe a point on it's even better, punches through that wind and air. But we're going to do that with good fundamentals and a well-formed loop, not with extra power. Whether we have the wind behind us blowing into our back or blowing into our face, one of our casting loops, either the back cast or the forward cast, is going to have to penetrate that wind. So many times people assume since they're fishing downwind, they don't have to worry about their back cast, but what happens is the back cast never gets straightened out because of a open or non-existent loop. It doesn't allow the line to straighten out behind them. Most of the forward cast gets wasted trying to straighten out that slack that was created back there. So if we have a wind behind us, we still have to make a loop that straightens out. So first we're going to talk about a wind to our back. So right now today, I have a pretty decent breeze blowing from my right to my left. My back casts still have to go into that wind. Most of the back casts I make are high in the back. They unroll low in the front, so that I can pinpoint accurate placement of my fly. The wind won't blow it off course, and I can tell exactly where it's going to land. If I have a wind behind me and I start making upward casts like I usually do, the wind gets up underneath that line and it tries to shove it up and back towards me, and it's much more difficult for that line to straighten out. So what I will do in that case is lower my back cast, but more into a sidearm position like this. Now I'm going directly into that wind. I'm not shooting it up at an angle to the wind where the wind can collapse my line. I hear many casters talking about when it's windy, we got to get the tip down below the wind. I assure you that wind is blowing just as good right here as it was up there. But here I'm going into the wind. I am not casting at an angle. So I'm really not trying to get under any wind by doing this. I'm not getting under the wind. I am casting directly into it, directly away from it. If you have a wind to your back, well-formed loops directed into the wind. If your back cast looks something similar to this, and we have that going into the wind, this isn't getting straight when the wind isn't blowing, but certainly when all that line has a big curve to it, the wind is shoving it back towards us, then so much of that forward stroke is wasted trying to fix that slack we had, and it ends up falling in a pile. A simple experiment for you to try is put your line in a big curve out here on the ground and try making a regular cast with the same amount of effort you would use if it was straight. Didn't get straight. If I put this line out straight, one stroke, completely straightened out, would have cast more line. If you start to see the effect that this slack has on your line, you will be amazed at how much of your stroke you may be wasting trying to straighten out the line. It's very typical on my boat, a 16-foot boat, So the person's standing on the front, maybe 15 feet away from me, trying to cast 30 to 40 feet of line. I watch the fly in the back cast never come past the back of the boat. So they're not even straightening it out halfway a lot of times, and they're already having to come forward because it has ran out of momentum and would start falling into the water because of a downward directed or a poorly formed loop. Now let's talk about casting directly into the wind. And now the wind is coming into my face. I am going to have loops, if I want them to aim accurately, unrolling right above my target. So I could have really nice shaped loops like this. If I let this thing go up here, in dead calm, it doesn't land where I want. 100 times in a row, if the wind's blowing at me, that cast that unrolls up here is getting blown way off my target. If you're sight fishing or you're throwing to an object or a specific spot, your cast has to be unrolling down in the front. So I could continue with my sidearm cast, which would work just fine, or I can go back to a more normal cast because now the wind is actually helping to straighten out my back cast, and it's pushing it back away from me when I cast up. It is not shoving it up under, it's not getting up underneath it and trying to keep it from straightening out. So most of the time, if I'm casting into the wind, it is going to be much more in this style, where it comes up over the top, down in the front, up over the top, down in the front, and I follow through. One of the most consistent mistakes I see made when people are casting into the wind is trying to A, add extra muscle, and B, slamming the tip down. Hopefully they will drive it into the wind. So they take a loop which could have been like this, nice well-formed loop, and they go, now I'm going to get it down into the ground, land it in a pile about 15 feet away from the tip of my rod right here. So slamming it harder is never going to make it work better. Driving it down into the water is only going to make it do just that, fall into the water. If we want our cast to go out towards our target, we must direct that thing into the wind, into the wind. So even if we're blind casting and trying to cover water, the more we can cast a nice well-formed loop. We want to get all this extra stuff up. Here comes a pretty good breeze right now. Into the wind. It shot all that out. Here's 50 feet of fly line. You have a 10-foot leader. We're at 60 feet there. And if we had that line off the reel, 1, 2, now we're at almost 70 feet in 2 strokes into a wind. Only way that's going to happen is if I'm directing it out towards my target with a well-formed loop. If my delivery loop, when I let that thing go, is non-existent because I'm pulling the bottom half of it away, so instead of what we just saw, if that delivery loop looks like this, the wind shoves that thing right back into a pile. Now that you've seen the importance of making a well-formed loop that penetrates the air and certainly the wind, you can start putting these things together, working on your fundamentals. If your loops don't look like that when it's calm, they're certainly not going to be effective when it's windy. And too many people have to give up, even with a wind between 5 and 10 miles an hour, because that line just does not straighten out due to lack of loop dynamics. But work on your loops. Check out some of my videos. I have a fly casting playlist, common fly casting errors. See if one of those things is affecting your cast, and it will help you to improve the shape of your loop, make your fly fishing a lot easier. If you're in the Orlando area, you want a personal fly casting lesson, you can come get one from me. 7 days a week, I'll run these lessons. And if you're not gonna be here, you still like some advice, I do video fly casting instruction, you can check out my website here below.